No one knows the true history of the Naruto universe. We think we understand the hierarchy of power, but there's a crack in the mythology, a bloodstained fracture that has existed since Naruto's manga, a loose thread that Kishimoto left hanging, which Boruto is trying to pull together. This all goes back to the destroyed mural, the lost pair of Otsutsuki, and the one entity that grants true immortality. That, of course, being Lord Jashin. You see, I believe that Lord Jashin has been plotting his return for the better part of a millennia, and it all ties into the web of Shibai, Akebei, Amado, and even the very foundation that this universe is built on, that of course being chakra. Now, this isn't the first Jashin connection theory ever made. In fact, I myself have made videos on this in the past, but the difference here is that I've finally understood the why. I'm going to prove that Jashin is not a made-up cultist deity, but instead an Otsutsuki who disobeyed the rules of his clan and avoided his own extinguishment. Now, to understand where Boruto is going with this Jashin Otsutsuki convergence, we have to look back at the biggest anomaly in Naruto, that of course being Hidan. This guy was a C-list ninja in terms of raw talent. He didn't have a tailed beast, he didn't have a Kekkei, he didn't have immense chakra reserves like Kisame or Hashirama, and yet Hidan possessed an ability that even the greatest medical ninja like Tsunade could not replicate: true passive immortality. Hidan could survive decapitation. He could also survive total body destruction as long as his head remained intact. But the most disturbing part isn't that he survived, it's how he survived. Every major feat in Naruto requires chakra. Regeneration requires chakra. The creation of all things requires chakra. Even Edo Tensei requires a living sacrifice and chakra to maintain the binding. Yet that didn't seem to be the case for Hidan's immortality. He didn't need the sustenance of the Gedo statue or the cells of White Zetsu. He didn't need to weave hand signs or mold chakra. His body just passively performed the function without his input. Now, in the Boruto manga, we have finally been given a name for abilities that defy the logic of ninjutsu, abilities that rewrite reality without hand signs or chakra molding. We call them shinjutsu. Shinjutsu are techniques of gods. Daemon's reflection is a shinjutsu. Ada's omnipotence is a shinjutsu. These abilities are sometimes passive, absolute, and divine. Hidan's ritual mirrors Daemon's reflection ability almost perfectly. Daemon touches you or someone else, and the intent to kill is reflected back onto you physically. Hidan ingests your blood, a biological touch per se, and the physical damage is also reflected back onto you. Both mechanisms bypass durability. Both mechanisms bypass distance. There are two sides of the same coin. Daemon reflects the intent before the action. Hidan reflects the action after the connection. This leads us to our first major conclusion. Hidan wasn't using ninjutsu. He was instead accessing a lower-tiered, ritualistic form of shinjutsu. The real question is, where did he get it from? Well, the databooks state that Hidan was the first successful experiment of the Jashin religion. This implies that not only was this a real thing, but also that there were many failures. So the theory or belief that Hidan simply made up the concept of Jashin and his abilities were simply a family trait doesn't quite make sense. The databook itself confirms that this ritual or experiment existed long before Hidan himself. He was simply the first successful experiment. It's also important to acknowledge that one simply doesn't experiment with a prior. You experiment with technology or biology. So someone or something gave Hidan that power. That then brings us back to the mural and the Otsutsuki. In the dimension where Sasuke found the juvenile Tentals, there was also a tablet with 6 symbols. These symbols represent the pairs of the Otsutsuki that have visited this planet, or at least this sector of the universe. One shows Kaguya and Ishiki, the other shows Momoshiki and Kinshiki, and the last one shows the missing pair of Otsutsuki. Amado later revealed the existence of Shibai Otsutsuki, a being who consumed so many chakra fruits that he evolved past the need for a physical body and supposedly ascended to a higher dimension. Many believe that he's one of the missing Otsutsukis, which makes sense given his lore, and though Amado said that he fed himself to the god tree, thus resurrecting over and over again, it is possible that he once had a partner, since the Otsutsuki always travel in pairs. So the current theory is that Shibai betrayed his partner, or perhaps his partner was lesser or was meant to be eaten. However, we know that Kaguya turned on Ishiki and left him for dead, and took the fruit for herself, so things can happen that go against what they were meant to do in those positions. So what if thousands of years ago, Shibai and this unnamed Otsutsuki arrived on Earth and battled someone incredibly powerful? Shibai then consumed his comrade, similar to what happened with Momoshiki and Kinshiki, which is why his clothing is tattered similar to Fuse Momoshiki, and also why he has the black markings on his body. Though this wasn't enough to defeat this person, so they still lost the battle and was likely killed in the process. Now what happens next is really important, because as we're told by Momoshiki, when an Otsutsuki dies, their souls are extinguished. That means they never go to the Pure Lands, Limbo, or any metaphysical plane. Their souls are in essence wiped from existence, which is why they need the Karma Seal to anchor their souls to the land of the living. Now, I'm not sure which came first. Maybe them using the karma is why they suffer this fate, or maybe they created the karma to avoid this fate. In either case, an Otsutsuki doesn't ascend to another plane of existence when they die without a vessel. They instead get wiped out of existence. So what was the deal with Shibai? Well, it is important to point out that Amado's theory on what happened to Shibai is just that, a theory. He never asserts this as the only conclusion. In fact, he outright says that it is possible that Shibai was killed, but also inserts his own hypothesis that he simply ascended. One of these theories is true, and Kishimoto presenting this as vaguely as possible is very intentional. So we're left to put the pieces together and figure out which route is more plausible, which leads me to my main problem with the ascension theory. You see, by itself it does make sense. A guy becomes too powerful and rage quits to ascend to a higher plane of existence. It's very simple and has been done multiple times. The problem is the surrounding factors, such as the Otsutsuki tablet. For one, it's presented to us that the goal of the Otsutsuki is to consume countless planets and evolve into an Otsutsuki god. That is the will that Ishiki passed on to Code, not Ishiki's will, the will of the Otsutsuki. So for all intents and purposes, Shibai's actions would be an accurate representation of that. He devoured planets and evolved into a god. He embodies what it means to be an Otsutsuki. Yet if we assume that one of the symbols on the destroyed tablet belonged to him, it seems as if he wasn't in the good graces of the clan itself. Typically when this happens in any cult or faction, it implies that the member did something they weren't supposed to do, disobeyed some rule, or disregarded some essential custom. It must have been something egregious for them to go to such an extent, and if that is the case, what custom did Shibai not adhere to? Well, I believe that it has something to do with his continued existence, in whatever form he has currently taken. You see, instead of ascending to another plane of existence, I think Shibai was killed by something far more powerful. But instead of accepting his fate, which would have been instant extinguishment, he found a way to cheat death. Not through karmic resurrection, which is the way of the Otsutsuki, but something more sinister. I think Shibai meddled with different forces of nature and found a way to guarantee his survival through blood rituals, which allowed his soul to enter the Pure Lands instead of being extinguished. This, of course, is illegal, which is why his and his partner's stone pillars were destroyed, essentially making them outcasts who disregarded the clan's rules and customs. This is where Kishimoto's use of misdirection comes into play. He seemingly had Momoshiki confirm Amado's theory by saying that Shibai was an Otsutsuki and he's no longer in this dimension, but he never confirms the why. Is Shibai no longer in this dimension because he died, or is he no longer here because he ascended? Which one is it? This hasn't been confirmed as yet, and if we assume that Momoshiki knows the truth of Shibai, this dimension that he's currently inhabiting could simply be the Pure Lands or Limbo. It doesn't confirm that he actually ascended. Now, if what I'm saying is true, what I think happened next is the creation of Jashin. Shibai wanted to return to the mortal realm, but he can't manifest physically without a vessel. That's when he created the identity and the cult of Shibai. He found a way to influence humans from the Pure Lands and give them instructions on how to create the perfect vessel for him to inhabit. That is the actual purpose of the Jashin experiments, which is noted in the databook to have been a very real thing. The problem is that finding a vessel isn't easy. I mean, it took Ishiki thousands of years to find his, and while Hidan was the first successful case in the sense that he was able to reproduce some of Jashin's power, he wasn't a perfect vessel, not enough for Jashin to inhabit his body. It is a somewhat similar situation to the case of Jigen and Ishiki. He wasn't a perfect vessel, but he was a vessel. This, by the way, is supported by events in Naruto's manga, as seen with Hagoromo leaving the Pure Lands to bestow power upon Naruto and Sasuke, or even Obito sending his power from the Pure Lands to inhabit Kakashi's body. It isn't a coincidence that Hidan's reflection power is similar to Damon's reflection power, which stems from Shibai. They both come from the same place. It's just that Damon was more compatible. Now this then leads us to Amado's Sanzu. Amado is a man of science, supposedly. He claims to be a simple genius who modified bodies to defeat Jigen, but his tech is very suspicious. He forms cyborgs that are stronger than Jigen. He knows the physiological structure of a god. He has Shibai's DNA. But look closer at his equipment. Look at the device used to regenerate Delta in the Boruto manga. The Delta pod is marked with a symbol, a triangle circumscribed within a circle. This is the symbol of Jashin. Some dismiss this as a coincidence for years. It's just a geometric shape, they said. But in a series where symbols have meaning, geometry is never accidental. Why would a man of science use the symbol of a cultist god? Well, maybe because they are the same thing. Amado isn't just a scientist. Amado is the high priest of Shibai. For one, let's look at Amado's surname, Sanzu. The Sanzu River is the Japanese Buddhist equivalent of the river Styx, the river one crosses to reach the afterlife. His daughter's name, Akebei, refers to a vine, but it can be linked to the opening of the door to the afterlife. Amado's entire motivation is resurrection. He wants to bring his daughter back, but he isn't using Edo Tensei, which restores the soul. He isn't using Rene Rebirth. He's using karma, the Otsutsuki method of digitizing a soul and overwriting a body. With this in mind, I believe that Amado didn't just find the cells of Shibai, he was guided to it, just as Hidan was guided to the rituals of Jashin. Now the next question, of course, would be why would Amado do this? And the answer to that question is obvious. Maybe Jashin has promised him something even Ishiki couldn't, the true resurrection for his daughter in exchange for a body. We have to remember that karma wouldn't resurrect Akebei, it instead creates a duplicate personality. So while this person would behave like Akebei and have the memories of Akebei, the first Akebei would still be dead. Amado knows this. He himself said this in part 1, which is why I found it strange that he would take this route to begin with. And that is what makes this theory even more plausible. You see, I believe that Jashin realized something really important, which is that he can't simply inhabit a vessel because they possess his data. He needs something that anchors his soul to that person's body, which is the purpose of the karma seal. That is where Kawaki and his karma seal comes into play. Amado claims to have infused Akebei's data into Kawaki's karma seal, but I think the person's data within that karma seal actually belongs to Shibai. So when Kawaki implants that karma seal onto the clone of Akebei, that karma will proceed to overwrite her cells with that of Shibai. And since Shibai's soul wasn't extinguished, that will allow him to anchor his soul to that vessel. So once the process is completed, Shibai will finally be able to resurrect in his true form, in a body that's tuned to his frequency, a perfect vessel designed just for him. Then he can use omnipotence to bring the real Akebei back to life, or whatever else he's planning on doing. Now, I know some will say, well, if he could use omnipotence to revive Akebei, why didn't he use it on himself? And the answer to that question is that maybe he can't for some mechanic-based reason, which is very plausible. But I guess we'll see. With that said, that's it for the video. I think I went on for a bit too long. I didn't want to, but I just had a few more ideas flowing in that I wanted to incorporate into the theory. Now, it is possible that nothing I said comes to fruition, but the opposite can also be true. So again, I guess we'll see. But yeah, if you guys liked it, drop a like. If you're new, subscribe. And also, do you think the theory makes sense in general? Do you think the Jashin part is necessary? Do you think the Shibai stuff could stand by itself? I do think there's a way to do it, and if I spend enough time to, put it together, I can make it work. I do think it's a good way to close that plotline, but it's up to Kishimoto and Ikimoto if they want to do it or not. But yeah, that's it for me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.